بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Last week's lesson we made a start on the Jama'ah and the congregation section of Mukhtasar al-Quduuri. And I mentioned that according to Imam Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayh, praying salah with congregation is a sunnat muakkada, is a emphasized sunnah. And afterwards we then went on to look at who can be imam, what type of people can lead the congregation and can lead the prayer and be the imam. And we then went on to look at those people who, for them to be imam is makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. And we concluded last week's lesson by looking at the word fasiq, and it's mentioned that it is makruh tahrimi and severely disliked for someone who is a fasiq and a transgressor to lead the prayer and become an imam. Now, who is a fasiq? Just a quick recap and a quick reminder. The fasiq is someone who habitually does small things or does big things. Now the key word here is the word habitually, is because obviously we are not prophets, we are not ma'soom, so we as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are prone to commit errors and are prone to commit sins and mistakes. As mentioned in the hadith of Tirmidhi, kullu bani Adam khattab, that every human being is a sinner. So we will commit sin. But what makes us a fasiq and a transgressor will be, is that if we are all the time committing small sins. So I gave an example last week of looking at unlawful women, gazing at an unlawful woman. So that is considered to be a small sin, as certain scholars have mentioned, that is known as a saghira sin. But if a person is habitually and continuously doing that, looking outside from his bedroom window and looking at all the girls and so on, then that will make that person a fasiq and a transgressor, and for him to lead the prayer will be makruh tahrim. Now the issue which we need to look at here, which is a very important question, is that if someone who is a fasiq, someone who is committing great sins, he is committing adultery, he's drinking alcohol, he's gambling, he's got houses and mortgages, he's got like interest transactions, he's doing all these kind of things. And on top of that, he's an imam, and people are reading salah behind this particular imam. Now the question is, do we have to repeat that salah or not? Now the reason why this particular question comes about is because there is a text in a very famous Hanafi jurisprudence book called Raddul Muhtar, written by Allama ibn Abidin al-Shami rahimullah. And in this particular book he has mentioned that kullu salat, every salat uddiyat ma'al karaha, which has been performed with detestability, with karahiyat, tajibu i'adatuha, it is obligatory and wajib to repeat. So the scholar has mentioned that every salah which is performed with qira'at tahlimi, meaning that is performed there and it is makruh tahlimi, then you are obliged to repeat that particular salah. Now as I mentioned before that, and in last week's lesson, that praying salah behind those who do habitual small sins or who are committing great sins, reading salah behind someone who doesn't have a beard, who shaves or trims his beard, then it is makruh tahrimi to pray your salah behind him. Now the question is that do you have to repeat your salah or not? Now it is a unanimous opinion amongst the imams and scholars that praying salah behind someone who is a fasiq and a transgressor, even though you will not receive the full reward and the full sawab of your prayers, but it is not obligatory for you to repeat your salah. You are not obliged to repeat your salah. Now, let's look at the reasons why. Number one, it's mentioned a hadith of Sunan Abu Dawood and Sunan Daraqutni that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, pray salah behind every righteous person and behind every fajir and transgressing person. So that's one evidence where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is advising us that anyone who is a righteous and also those who are fasiq, those who are transgressors, read salah behind them and the salah will be done. Number two, the second reply or the second evidence is that when we look at the story of Sayyidina Uthman anhu's martyrdom, how Sayyidina Uthman was martyred, and obviously this is you probably read this particular story before, how the people, you call them Baghis, the rebels, went against Uthman anhu, they surrounded his house. Now those rebels who surrounded Uthman anhu's house, when you look at it, going against the Islamic ruler, going against the Amirul Mu'mineen is a great sin. But it is not mentioned in any sources that during that particular time and standoff, Uthman anhu or any other scholars who were on the haqq and on the truth gave a ruling and said that don't pray salah behind these people. Because what happened was that when they took over Hazrat Uthman anhu's home and they surrounded his home, they also were leading the prayers in Masjid al-Nabawi. So those ulama or those companions who were on the haqq and on the truth, none of them gave a fatwa or a ruling and said that, or don't pray salah behind these rebels. That is another example where praying salah behind someone who's a fasiq and a transgressor would be allowed. And another evidence is that sometimes not praying salah behind a fasiq imam, or if you were to give a ruling or a fatwa that praying salah behind a fasiq imam, you have to repeat that salah. What may happen is that it may lead to further fitna and it may lead to further mischief. And how can fitna or mischief be created? It's simple, because if someone was to say, oh, don't pray salah behind this imam because it shouldn't be here. So automatically what you've got is that you've got a division within the community. In one masjid, you will see people not praying salah behind this imam, they'll go to another masjid, and then when this imam is not there, then they'll come to this masjid and so on. And this will cause disunity, this will cause ikhtilaf, this will cause problem in the community. So therefore, you should pray salah behind the imam, who may be fasting, who may be a sinner, and if you do, you don't have to repeat your salah. Lastly, the text which I quoted at the beginning, narrating from Allama ibn Abidin al-Shami rahimahullah, who says that any salah which is performed with detestability, you have to repeat it. The meaning of that particular text is that any salah which is performed with detestability, i.e. internal detestability. We're going to look at this later, in particular when we do the Sajda Sahwa section, where if you were to omit something which is wajib or obligatory in salah, then that salah, the obligation of the salah will be done, but it will be makruh tahrim. So just say, for example, it is obligatory for you to recite Surah Fatiha, but you didn't. So that salah which you have prayed will be makruh tahrim. So the text of Ibn Abidin al-Shami rahimahullah is with regarding to those salahs or those prayers which are performed and internally there has been some detestability created by you missing out obligatory things, by you missing out something wajib and obligatory. However, if externally some detestability comes, such as are you praying salah behind the imam who shaves his beard or who listens to music, who deals in drugs, wallahu alam, then that particular salah you don't have to repeat. Because the ibarat or the text in Ibn Abidin al-Shami al-Mukhtar talks about repeating salah when you yourself have done something in the salah which has rendered it disliked, not based on external factors. So the whole conclusion which we can come to is that try your best not to pray salah behind the fasting and transgressing people. However, if you need to, Just for example, this happens to be, let's say, a mosque, the mosque where the imam is based, it happens to be your local mosque, there's no any other mosque nearby. So in that situation, you can pray salah behind that imam in that particular masjid, and the sin will be on those people who made such an imam, who made that person who listens to songs, who listens to music, who shaves or trims his beard. The guna and the sin will be on those who made such an individual imam. So it's very important that when you choose an imam, he has to not only be knowledgeable, but at the same time he has to be God-fearing and muttaqi as well. And now we're going to look forward. The next text afterwards, the author goes on to say, وَالْأَعْمَى وَوَلَدِ الزِّنَا, that it is makruh tanzihi, or slightly disliked, to make a blind person an imam and also a illegitimate child an imam. So you should not make blind people imam. Now the reason for the detestability is that blind people, generally speaking, because they cannot see, they are more prone to be careless or be heedless when it comes to taharat issues and when it comes to purification and cleanliness issues. So obviously they've gone to the toilet and they've urinated, and because they're blind, they're not sure whether some urine has come into the clothes or come into the body, and they haven't realized it. So if you were to make such people imam, what may happen is that the followers who are praying salah behind, it may lead to them to have baseless misgivings and waswasas about the imam. They're probably thinking, oh, he's blind. When he went to the toilet, did he do istinja properly? How are we sure that, urine did not fall on his clothes, did not fall on his body, and so on and so forth. So when that happens, when people start having kind of baseless misgivings about the imam, it kind of confuses, creates some kind of ikhtilaf and some kind of confusion within the community. So therefore, the scholars have said that, look, it's best that you don't make them imam. However, if that is not the case, let's say, for example, if the blind person is such that you have full yaqeen and full trust that he cleans himself properly, he takes precaution. Say, for example, his wife assists him. There is one ruling that, for example, if a person is blind or he's ma'zur or he's not got no arms or anything like that, and he can't do istinja himself, then his wife or someone can actually assist them in cleaning their private parts. So if that is the case, then you can make such people the imam. And there's also hadiths in Abu Dawud where it's narrated that Abdullah bin Maktum al-Anhu, the famous blind Sahabi, he would sometimes be the imam when Rasulullah would go out for various expeditions and for various battles. And the next text then goes to say that وَوَلَدِ الزِّنَا, that it is makruh tanzihi to have a legitimate child, a waladul zina, to be the imam. Now, a waladul zina, a legitimate child, is basically someone who was born out of wedlock. Wedlock meaning a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. They've had intercourse outside marriage, which has led to the girl falling pregnant, and she gives birth to a child. So that child is called a waladul zina. Islamically we're talking about, that child is called a legitimate child, someone who was born out of wedlock, i.e. their parents were not married. If, say, for example, there is a scenario where, may Allah forbid, if a wife, a Muslim wife, was to have an affair, commit adultery, and she gives birth to a child. Now, even though, according to the custom, we may call that particular child a waladul zina, a legitimate child, but technically or shar'an, that child is not called illegitimate. And the reason why is because there is a very famous hadith of Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawud, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-waladu lil-firash, wal-ahilu lil-hajar," which basically means that when a woman gives birth to a child, then automatically her husband will be the father of this child, even though she may have committed adultery, she may have been cheating on her husband and had a unlawful relationship, and even though DNA and everything established that this third person is the father, even then the Sharia says that the father of the child will be the husband who she's married to. So if that person becomes the imam, that's okay, because we consider that particular child, even though DNA may say otherwise, but the actual child will be considered to be the husband of that woman. However, when a boy and girl out of wedding, out of marriage, have a relationship and they give birth to a child, then the child is considered as walad zina and is considered as illegitimate. And it's makruh tanzihi for people to make them imam. And the reason why, the main reason for making them imam, or not making them imam, shall I say, is because having someone with such a background lessens the people attending that particular jamaat and that particular congregation. What I mean by that is that, well, I'm not sure about in this day and age, but in particular in the early eras, it was considered like a defect to be a walad zina, to be an illegitimate child. It's considered like something bad, not nice, like your mother has committed zina and then you came out and so on. It's not considered something nice. So therefore, if that person then becomes an imam, then what could happen is that people, because of his history and background, it could actually lessen people coming to that particular masjid. So therefore, the scholars have said that it's makruh tanzihi to make such a person imam. However, if that is not the case, just say for example, there may be scenarios where people don't know about your background, even though you may have been walad zina, but people don't know your background, or for example, people know your background, but because of your ilm and your knowledge, they kind of overlook what your parents have done. Then in that situation, you can make that individual an imam, and there is no detestability in making him an imam. Now the next text goes on to say, فَإِن تَقَدَّمُوا جَازَ, that if anyone made the aforementioned people imam, even though it's makruh tanzihi to make a blind person imam or an illegitimate child imam, it's makruh tahdimi to make a fasik and a transgressor imam, it's makruh to make a slave imam, and so on and so forth. However, if they did become the imam, jaza, i.e. that salah will be permissible and will be valid. As I've already explained, that praying salah behind those who commit grave sins, those who shave beards, those who trim beards, then your salah will be done. Now the next text, the author goes on to say that it is appropriate for the imam, Allah yatula bihi musalla, that he should not lengthen the salah, that he should not make the salah or the namaz long. So it is preferable and appropriate for the imam that he doesn't lengthen the salah. Now what I mean by lengthen the salah, it means that the imam, when leading the prayer, he should not make the salah or namaz so long that people behind get tired. Now, this doesn't mean, by the way, that the imam for Fajr prayer should just read Inna Atayna Fal Kawthar in the first rakat and Qul Huwallahu Ahad in the second rakat and finish it within 2-3 minutes. No. It means that the sunnah recitation, which you are supposed to do, and I think there's a section which is coming up afterwards, which talks about from where to where you should recite from in Salah. So like say for example for Fajr prayer, you should start from Surah Al-Hujurat, which is the 26th para, all the way up to Was-Samai Zatil Buruj. So you should recite from there. However, what this particular text is saying is that it is disliked for the Imam say to pray in the Fajr Salah, in the first rakat, Surah Baqarah, and in the second rakat, all of Surah Ali Imran. So that's going to take hours and people are going to get tired. So you shouldn't make the Salah too long. Okay, it should be like average, like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, that's okay. But anything longer than that, like say Isha taking 20 minutes, 25 minutes and so on, then that will be considered makruh and disliked. There's actually one Tabi, his name slips my mind, who actually says that, you know, the Salah, it should be actually short. That when you pray Salah, try to pray Salah with small surahs and small chapters. And the reason why he said this is because if you make your Salah too long, you will be more prone to divert your attention away from the salah. The salah too long, then your concentration goes and you start thinking about worldly things, you start thinking about other things. However, if the salah is short, then you could concentrate more on the prayer. So the middle ground basically is that try to make it long, but not long where it's like too extreme, like Isha you're taking half an hour, Maghrib you're taking half an hour. That's going to be too long where it's going to cause problem and taklif for the people behind. The next text, the author goes on to say, وَيُكْرَهُ لِلنِّسَاءَ يُصَلِّينَ وَحْدَهُنَّ بِجَمَاعَةٍ فَإِنْ فَعَلْنَا وَقَفَتِ الْإِمَامَةُ وَسْطَهُنْ كَالْعُرَاةِ. Now the next text here talks about women leading prayer. Now there's one ruling which needs to be clarified, and that is that it is totally impermissible and unlawful for women to be imams of men. So just say, for example, you've got men behind and you've got a woman as an imam, then that is totally not allowed in Islam, and such a prayer would not be allowed in Islam at all. Now the next question here, the next issue here is with regards to, can women amongst themselves be imams? Just say, for example, like a group of women, they've got together for some kind of lecture or ta'aleem or something like that, and then afterwards it's salah time, it's namaz time. So the question is that, can women amongst themselves lead the prayer and become the imam? Now other schools of thought, in particular Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, is of the view that women can be imams, like women within their own jamaat, within their own congregation, then that would be permissible, that would be allowed, without any accessibility, in particular for the nafil and the optional prayer. However, in the Hanafi fiqh, he says that for women to be imam is makruh tahrim. So whether the woman is doing imamat of women behind, it doesn't matter. Even then, it is makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. Whether it's a farz prayer or whether it's like nafil or optional prayer like tarawih or anything like that, it is makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. Now the text goes on to say that even though it's makruh tahrimi and severely disliked, فَإِنْ فَعَلْنَا, if the women decide to do it, even though it's severely disliked for them to be imams for their own jamaat and for their own congregation, but if a woman decides to be the imam, then how should she stand? Where should she stand? So the text goes on to say, وَقَفَتِ الْإِمَامَةُ وَسْطَهُنْ كَالْعُرَاةِ, that the woman should stand in the middle and she should not stand like men do, i.e. in front of the congregation or in front of the jama'ah. What I mean by that is, just for example, there's like 5 women have got together and they want to do their own jama'ah. So whoever they decide to be the imam, she should stand right in the middle. So basically she'll be in the middle. There'll be 2 sisters on either side of her. If, say for example, there's like quite a lot of women have got together and there's like 3 rows of women. So the woman will stand in the middle of the second row. So that's how they will do it. Okay, so if they were to do the jamaat amongst themselves, then unlike in men where the man stands in front and then you've got a congregation behind, for women, the woman should stand in the middle and the other sisters and the other women would stand either side of her. So that's what this particular text is saying, that even though it's makruh tahrimi, however, if they do want to do the congregation together, then waqafat al-imamatu wasṭahun, the imam will stand in the middle. Now this takes me on to the, okay, actually we'll come back to that later. Let's have a look at the next text. Now the next text goes on to say, وَمَنْ صَلَّى مَعَ وَاحِدٍ أَقَامَهُ أَيَّمِينِهِ, that whoever is praying or leading the salah with another individual, أَقَامَهُ أَيَّمِينِهِ, he should make that person stand on his right hand side. Now this particular ruling tells us how to stand when it comes to jamaat or when it comes to forming the congregation. And the 2 scenarios here. Remember in Islam, actually in Islam, all the scholars have said that unlike the Jummah prayer, where besides the Imam, you require 3 people, when it comes to the normal Jamaat or normal congregation, as mentioned in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Isnani fama fawqahuma jama'at, that 2 people can constitute a Jamaat and a congregation. So if one person is the Imam, and then you've got another person behind him, then if they were to pray Salah together, that constitutes a Jamaat, a congregation, and like the hadith we read in last week's lesson, you will get the reward of 27 times more reward in that particular Salah than say reading Salah by yourself. Now, what this particular text in Quduuri is telling us is that when you pray Salah with one individual, then you should make him stand on the right hand side. Aqamahu ay yamini. So you make him stand on the right hand side. So just for example, the Imam is here, standing here, then that person will stand on his right hand side. But when he stands on his right hand side, he should make sure that his feet is not in front of the Imam. Because if that is the case, then that would not be allowed, because the muqtadis, the followers, they should have their feet and they should be placed behind the Imam. So just as example, if the Imam is going to be standing here on this particular musalla and prayer mat, then the muqtadi or the follower should be standing here on his right hand side behind the musalla here. So basically his feet should be placed around here. If the Imam's feet is placed here, the follower who's praying next to the Imam, his feet should be placed there. So it should not be, if it is on the same line as the Imam, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's preferable that you have it slightly behind, so that the muqtadi, when he does the sajda and the ruku and so on, he doesn't go in front of the Imam, because that will then render his salah invalid. So it says here that if he is praying with one individual, aqamahu ay yaminihi, he makes him stand on the right hand side. وَإِنْ كَانَ إِثْنَيْنِ تَقَدَّمُهُمَا. And if there are 2 people praying salah behind him, then the Imam should be in front of them. So just say for example, if there is a group of 3 people and they want to form a congregation and a jama'ah, then in that case, like we do with normal congregation prayers, you have the Imam at the front and the 2 people will be behind. So basically there's only 2 things which you need to remember. If there's only one individual praying with the Imam, then make that individual stand next to the Imam on the Imam's right hand side. Remember, on the Imam's right hand side. And if there are 2 individuals or more besides the Imam, then you make them stand behind the Imam like we normally do for the normal congregational prayer. Now the next text afterwards, the author goes on to say, وَلَا يَجُوزُ لِلرِّجَالِ أَن يَقْتَدُوا بِإِمْرَأَةٍ أَوْ صَبِيٍّ. That it is not permissible for a man to pray salah behind a woman, as I've already explained. أَوْ صَبِيٍّ. And it's also not permissible for a man to pray salah behind a mature child. An immature child. Sabi means a child or a kid. So someone who is immature, someone who hasn't reached the age of puberty, then it's not permissible for an individual to pray salah behind him. Now let's have a look at the word sabi or immaturity. Immature, when we talk about immature, we mean someone who hasn't reached the age of puberty. And if you remember before, I explained the signs of puberty in Islam, such as having a wet dream and so on and so forth, and having hair below his armpits or below his navel, then Islamically that is not considered as a sign of puberty. Now this particular ruling, bear in mind, is general in terms of whether the child is leading the farz prayer or whether he is leading a nafil prayer or a sunnah prayer such as tarawih. Even if the child is a hafiz and so on, but because he's immature, he cannot lead the prayer of mature men behind. So keep this in mind. Some mosques, what they do, especially in Taraweeh, because they can't find any Hafiz or any kind of person who's memorized the Holy Quran. So what they do, even though he's only like 8 years old, 9 years old, they're making the Imam. And then you've got people praying Salah behind him. So that is totally wrong, and the Salah would not be done. It's very important that when it comes to Imamat and so on, even for Taraweeh, that you have Imams who are baligh and those who are mature. A kid, even though he's a Hafiz of Quran, it is not permissible for him to lead the prayer of people who are mature and for those who are mature. So it says here that it's not permissible for a man to follow behind a woman and also follow behind a child. Now the next text then goes on to say, وَيَصُفُّ الرِّجَالِ ثُمَّ الصِّبْيَانِ ثُمَّ الْأُنْثَى ثُمَّ النِّسَاءِ. Now the next text here, the author, he talks about the importance of praying Salah in saf and in rows. And also he's telling us the sequence of who should pray behind the Imam, where should the men stand, where should the khunsa are those who have features of both men and women, and those who are women, where should they stand. Now before we look at the text, I'm just going to narrate some ahadith, and the whole purpose of this particular hadith is just to show the importance of this ruling regarding taswiyatul sufuf and the straightening of the rows. And there is a hadith which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, very famous hadith. He has said, "Sawwu sufufakum," which means straighten your rows. فَإِنَّ تَسْوِيَةَ السُّفُوفِ مِنْ إِقَامَةِ الصَّلَاةِ. And straightening the rows is min iqamati salah, is one of the integral parts of the salah. And in another hadith it says min tamami salah, it's one of the things which completes your salah and completes your prayer. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, La tusawwunna sufufakum, which means straighten your nose, أو لا يخالفن الله بين وجوهكم, otherwise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause disunity and ikhtilaf amongst you. And in another hadith, this is narrated by Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari ibn anhu, that he narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Istawu," to straighten your road, وَلَا تَخْتَلِفُوا, and do not do ikhtilaf, do not kind of disperse when it comes to straightening your road, meaning that don't stand in a way where some of you are in front of each other and some are behind each other. And then lastly, Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari anhu goes on to say, فَأَنْتُمُ الْيَوْمَ أَشَدُّ إِخْتِلَافًا, which means that he says regarding these times, that the reason why there's so much ikhtilaf and so much disunity amongst the Muslims is because of the adami taswiyati sufuf. Because the Muslims, when they are praying salah, they are not straightening their rows. Now straightening the rows is so simple, it's nothing difficult. When we see little children in school, when the teacher tells them to stand in a straight line, we see kids standing in a straight line. Even say for example, when we go to the post office or when we go to the bank, we could manage to stand in a straight line. So we can do it, but when it comes to salah, we're not bothered. So that's the whole, the truth of the matter is that when it comes to salah, it doesn't matter whether one person is standing here and one person is standing there. No, we're not bothered. We just stand wherever. So this is something which is actually our fault. And the severity of this is that because of our laxity, because of our laziness, this is causing ikhtilaf amongst the Muslim Ummah. And you could see that why is there so many differences amongst the Muslim Ummah, even according to in one sect, like the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, there's so many other groups, even in one group, whether you take the Wendis or Brelvis or whatever, you get other kind of different groups and so on. So why is it? Is because these kind of little things which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has prophesied, which if you don't do, Allah will cause ikhtilaf, we are doing it. And that is that even something simple, when we can't stand in a line, in a straight line together, then how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us ijtihad and give us unity? When we are not doing simple things like that, it is obvious that we are inviting Allah's wrath and we are causing disunity amongst ourselves. So it's very important that when we stand properly and we stand in a straight line. Now the text, which then goes to say that if you have the Imam, then behind the Imam there should be men standing. And if there are hunsas are those who have male teachers and female teachers, if there are anyone, then they should then stand behind men. And the text goes on to say, during Rasulullah ﷺ's time, when women would also come to the masjid, and inshallah we look at this in detail next week, about whether women can they attend masjids or not. So during Rasulullah ﷺ's time, when women would actually attend masjid, they would actually stand in the last row and the last row. So what this tartib is telling us, or the sequence is telling us, is that behind the Imam you should have male people, men and boys, and then after them there should be khunsa, those who are male and female teachers, and then afterwards there should be women, and that's how you should form the rows. The next thing here which we need to discuss is how to form the rows. Now when you form the rows, you should start from behind the Imam. These are like simple things, but we don't know, and we don't even want to ask any Imams or scholars regarding how to form the rows. Now the way you form a row is that you stand behind the Imam, and then you try to fill up the right hand side. Also at the same time, bearing in mind that the left hand side is not completely empty. So what I mean by that is, just say for example, if you come to the masjid and behind the Imam there's a row, and there's a kind of like equal spread of people on the right hand side and the left hand side. So therefore in that situation you should go and stand on the right hand side. And the reason why is that there is a hadith which Rasulullah ﷺ said, which can be found in Sunnah Abu Dawud, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala mayamin as-sufuf. That Allah and His angels send mercy and rahmah on the right hand side of the saf. So what we can gather is that if you come and there's like an equal spread of people, then what you should do, try forming the rows from the right hand side. Go and stand on the right hand side of the line. However, just say for example, if you come to the masjid, or like for example, you're sitting at the back of the masjid and the Jamaat is about to start and you're making your way to the first row, and you see that there's too many people on the right hand side, then in that situation you should go and stand on the left. And you should then stand on the left, and inshallah, as mentioned in the hadith of Ibn Majah, that if someone does it for that particular reason, then inshallah Allah will also send His mercy and rahmah on those who are standing on the left hand side of the row. Afterwards, the next adab or etiquette is that you then fill up the first row, then the next row, and then the next row, and where there should be gaps in the saf, it should only be in the last saf. What I'm trying to say here is, again, this is like another mistake of ours, is that when it comes to forming the row, we always kind of like, we'll only fill, say, 3/4 of the row up, and there'll be like 1 or 2 spaces there, but we don't fill that up, but instead we start the second row. The hadith which Rasulullah ﷺ has mentioned here, the atimmu saffal muqaddam, you complete the row which is in front of you, thumma alladhi yalihi, then fill up the row which is behind you. And in the last part of the hadith goes and says, فَمَا كَانَ مِن نَقْصٍ فَلْيَكُنْ فِي الصَّفِّ الْمُؤَخَّرِ, that if there is any kind of gap in a row, it should be in the last saf, i.e. in the last saf where all the latecomers are. There's only half a saf there or 3/4 saf. That should only be left for the very last saf of the congregation. But the safs which are in front, number 1, 2, 3 and so on, you should fill that up. When that is full, then make the next row. Sometimes what happens is that only the first row is only half full and we make the second row. Okay? So that again is wrong. And inshallah we'll continue next week regarding the rulings regarding stuff. But I'll also touch on the topic of the importance of coming forth and praying salah in the first row as well. Again, this is something which we are very lazy in doing, that we always like to stay in the second saf or the third saf and so on. But instead, Rasulullah ﷺ has mentioned many, many virtues of praying salah in the first saf, in the first gathering. And again, like I mentioned the hadith before, the angels, the malaika, they send blessings on those who are in the first saf. So whatever possible, inshallah we'll discuss it in detail next week, but whatever possible, especially in a masjid like this one here where it's not that many people attend. So even if you come like 1 minute early, I'm sure you could still get space in the first saf. Obviously there are other masajid where a lot of people come, so even if you like, if you were to attend 2 minutes early, even then you probably get no space. So something like a small masjid here, even if you attend, I'm sure 30 seconds before the Jamaat, you could still make it for the first saf. So whatever possible, try to make the first saf. Okay? You're not like immature or anything like that. All of you are mature, so there's no problem of your kids or anything. So all of you are mature, so therefore try your utmost best to pray salah in the first saf. Leave it here for this week. When Allah التوفيق لك ومن يسر واخر ربنا ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صلى الله عليه وسلم محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.